All right. Well, with that, we will get started. I'll stop my screen share here. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is Eco in an Echo Chamber, cutting through the noise for zero waste action. My name is Olivia Chabot. I am Just Zero's Communications Director and your host. We are thrilled to have you all join us today as part of Just Zero's Waste Free Future Summit. The summit is a platform for inspiring conversations, practical solutions, and powerful community connections among people across the country and the world who are working for a zero waste future. In this session, we'll discuss how social and digital media can be utilized to distill complex topics like zero waste and plastic pollution into clear, compelling messages that inspire action. With me today are Erica Sereno, an artist and author known for her widely published photojournalistic works that cut through plastic and fossil fuel industry misinformation to deliver the truth. Erica is also communications manager at Plastic Pollution Coalition. We're also joined by Dana Zaxalikova, a microplastics researcher, science communicator, and co-founder of the Microplastic Free Scanner app. Thank you both so much for being here today. I cannot wait to get this conversation started. But before I do, just a few housekeeping notes for everyone. As a reminder, this event is being recorded. All recordings will be made available on our YouTube channel after the summit is over. To be the first to know when those recordings are in fact available, make sure to subscribe to Just Yours emails. Feel free to use the chat throughout the event. You can introduce yourself here and engage with other participants. We will also be taking audience questions at the end of the event, so if at any point you have a question for one of our panelists, please enter it into the Q&A tab on the menu and not the chat. This helps us easily find all the questions. And with that, let's get started. So, first off, I kind of want to dive into making people care in a world of information overload. So, one of the biggest challenges we face as communicators isn't just explaining the science or the solutions, it's getting people to care in the first place. We're all living in a digital world where people are bombarded with content every second. So, against that backdrop, my first question for both of you is how do you break through and make issues like plastics and zero waste feel urgent, relevant, and personal? And Erica, if you want to get us started, that'd be great.
Thanks for having me. So I think the key with this kind of very urgent information, these urgent crises, is to address that urgency. People are concerned, and I think largely when you do confront folks with the facts, there's microplastic in our bodies, that the effects of the climate crisis are intensifying, and without urgent action, we're all kind of in a bad place. And these effects are happening now, and so people are suffering now. It's a lot of heaviness, and I think maintaining the acknowledgement of that heaviness is important because these are people's lived experiences. But we also need to present solutions because if we just hear the bad news, we're going to feel overwhelmed, and I think that's the biggest challenge right now because there is so much that we need to know. And it can be very hard to hear it, but we also need to realize that solutions to these problems do exist. They can be challenging to implement at times, but I think taking it one step at a time and presenting them in a way that's both tangible and also actionable is very important.
Thanks, Erica. That is so true. Solutions are a key part of this. You don't just want to share doom and gloom all day long. You have to also present solutions. Dana, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes. Yes, sorry. Yes, I'm just thinking that the thing is, uh, people already care about the environment, right? Like I don't know if there are people who will ask, like, do you care about your health? Do you care about like the well-being of the whole planet? I don't think there are a lot of people who will tell no, right? It's just about getting their attention to specific problems. That's like the main issue or what we're striving for as communicators.
Definitely. That's a great point, Dana. So going off of that, Dana, your work as a researcher and science communicator often makes the invisible world of microplastics visible for everyday audiences. So, what strategies have you found are more effective for breaking through that noise online and really sparking that, curiosity, even when it's something that people can't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of my strategy, I think I try to stick to three main points. First, to make the content simple, not to oversimplify it because people are not dumb, of course, but try not to use like too many terms or yeah, making it too technical. Second is about relatability. People should relate to the content or to the facts that you're sharing. If you're going to share about like, I don't know, microplastics in space or something like that, and that doesn't have a lot of to do with your life, for example, it can be difficult for them to relate, to care, and to get to give their attention to this stuff. So it's very important if you mention, for example, in my case, if I mention microplastics, I try to mention also why it's important for us to care, whether it's health, whether it's the environment or anything else. And the third thing is to try to make it question provoking or thought provoking. So I really like to maybe not give the whole information just to make people like curious and start to ask questions, because when they ask question and then they get answer, they will remember it more than if I just like put every information in the video, for example. So yeah, the three things that I try to stick to: simple, relatable, and thought-provoking.
Those are great strategies. And even that, the 3 points, that's like, simplifying it to share that with our audience as well. So thank you. Erica, from your perspective, you've written and photographed extensively about plastic pollution, often in ways that cut past industry spin and apathy. So, from your experience, what makes people stop, pay attention, and actually care about this issue when they might otherwise scroll past or feel overwhelmed?
Yeah, great question. I think it is definitely the relatability of plastic specifically because it is something that is in every single one of our lives. I often invite people to just look around you and list all the things that you see or know that are plastic. And there's probably 100 more that you don't know that are plastic, unfortunately. But yeah, to really present the facts in an unbiased way, and also off of Dana's point, it's like it is providing that science to provide that impartial, unbiased, fact-based information so that people can understand the truth. Because I think a lot of, especially the story of plastic pollution, a lot of it has been so spun historically that people are often shocked or surprised to learn things like most plastic made is never recycled, or that recycling itself is actually a strategy to make more plastic because it enables the production to continue. So I think really providing evidence and also examples. I think visuals are very powerful, specifically as a photographer, to be able to go to the garbage patch and go to the shores of Hawaii and literally stick your hand in the water and come out with a handful of plastic. It's a very visceral thing. And I think the emotional part of this story and other environmental stories, especially, is something that is relating to our lives. And the health of the earth is directly correlated to the health of people, and underscoring that really does get people to care, in my experience.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Erica. I completely hear what you're saying about that visual aspect. I think that is such a strong and impactful way to really grab people's attention, but also make them see this as a more tangible issue. So I want to kind of move along now about making scientific and technical content accessible, which, Dana, that's something you kind of already hit on with the simplicity of this. So once we've captured people's attention, the next challenge is keeping it. This is easier said than done, when so much of the information around plastics is technical and overwhelming. So often we're in positions of trying to message around dense scientific research, policy reports, and health studies. How do you take complex information and make it engaging and understandable for a general audience? Dana, do you want to get us started on that one?
I think it's a very complex thing to discuss because especially if you're very deep in the topic, it can be sometimes be difficult to understand what is like a common knowledge for people and what is not, right? When it comes to microplastics or plastic content that I make, I try to first get the most important information, I think. For example, when I read research, sometimes it can help like to know the bullet points, like the summary or abstract of the research. And I try to, that would be too technical and sciencey for me to explain, but the way I make content is how you do, for example, when you write a research, you also need to write an abstract, right? It's like a very condensed, a very, very condensed text or part or summary of what you did for your research. And that's how I basically treat my content as well. So I have all of this information, I have all of these facts and statistics, and I try to make and condense it so much into like this, very short format videos into 30 seconds. And it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But what helps is to try and see it from the other side. That also helps. What also helps me is asking for a feedback from my friends or relatives who are not really into even sustainability, but just to get their opinions, or what do they know about plastics in general? What is the common knowledge for them? I think it's a really great strategy for starters, especially. And after time, you already get adjusted and you learn with practice.
That is such a great point, and something that I do as well in my day-to-day work. If I'm so in it and I'm like, "Oh, is this too insider? Let me check with some friends, family members who, are not in this world. And hey, does this make sense to you? And if it's still too technical or jargony for them, all right, it's time to switch it up and simplify it even more."
I just want to, sorry, I just want to chime in and tell a very short story. There was a guy who made pitches about his startups, and his strategy was mainly because he gives like very good speeches, like it's very engaging. And his strategy is to take his 3-year-old niece and try to explain everything to her. And that's very cute, but he told us like it really helps. Like if they can understand and be engaged, everyone will. So yeah, maybe another insight.
I love that. What a great little story there. Thank you for sharing that. Erica, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think these are great strategies, and it is about, I think, also remembering who you're speaking to when you're sharing information. There are also like subsets of different audiences. You might be speaking to people that are already aware of environmental issues versus people who are unaware, or maybe children or younger people might have a different understanding, and also a different openness to different types of presentations of information. So to be flexible too, I think about the format is helpful.
Definitely. And speaking of that, format, Erica, having a career as a writer and photographer, um, how do you strike the balance between accuracy and accessibility, making sure that people understand the stakes without watering down the truth through those different mediums?
I really made it a point to go to the front lines of this issue, and document it for others to see in ways that are not just cut and dried. Again, trying to, share that visceral impact, like the handful of microplastics image, which has been shared a lot. I think it is something that really affects people to see that and know that that's simply just a handful of plastic scooped from the ocean. But yes, to in our changing media landscape, we do have to tap into these different types of media and, visual imagery right now with especially our online world, can be sometimes just actually very flat, because if you're scrolling through Instagram, for example, I think that can be, we can kind of dull ourselves to it. So I think to take different perspectives when you are, looking at an issue like plastic and share it from the perspective of a person, from the perspective of Mother Nature herself, from an animal, and try to, really build this big picture. I think that's part of this work that's really important, is to connect the dots here. And so that does make it more accessible, because it doesn't feel like, you know, the floating island of trash out in the Pacific Ocean anymore. It's like, oh, I used a toothbrush and it ended up in the Pacific Ocean and it harmed a bird, or, whatnot. To really create those linkages, I think, is essential in this work.
Definitely. I like what you said about, changing the perspective and showcasing that this is impacting everyone and everyone has a different perspective. So I think that's really important. Dana, you're often translating new research on microplastics for people who likely don't have a scientific background. So how do you decide what to highlight, and what strategies do you use to, make that complicated science feel approachable?
Yeah, I actually touched upon some of the answer for this question, right? Uh, I just wanted to highlight one of the strategies that I use for understanding, for example, if I read a report or a research on something, I read it, then I close it, and I try to make, short bullet points of what I remembered. That makes me understand what I thought was important, that my brain remembered that, right? And I'm a human as well, and I'm a someone who's into sustainability and environment, and I feel like what I resonate with probably is something that a lot of people resonate with, or at least I hope so. So that's one, like another little strategy that I use. Yeah, but of course it's difficult to translate science into, especially into like social media. It takes practice, of course, but as I said, like trying to make this, to adapt all of this like little strategies, and practice and practice and practice, and then you can be good at it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting strategy. And I think it's something that all of us could take away. It might not be for scientific reports, but even articles that we read on a daily basis, jotting down what were the main takeaways for me from that. And it kind of helps keep those topics, those points top of mind. So, what a great strategy. Um, so kind of moving on to, we have the data, we've kind of broken it down for ourselves. How do we now leverage the digital tools that are available to us to inspire change? Um, so even when we make the information clear and compelling, there's still the challenge of reach. Social media is crowded, and we're in a constant battle for people's attention. So I want to talk about the tools, platforms, or strategies that you have both found actually work to get that content seen. So Dana, I'll start with you. What kinds of posts or formats have you found work best for cutting through that scroll and sparking engagement?
That's the question that I'm always asked, because that's a challenge, for sure. And again, I will repeat it throughout the this talk, that practice, 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 and practice makes perfect. Um, because yeah, social media is also changing a lot, and you need to learn what definitely keeps people attention or gets people's attention, and you can only know that when you create content and you analyze that, realize what works and what doesn't, try absolutely different formats, or try to adapt formats from other big influencers or big content creators as well. What I feel works the best in my case, um, it's short video formats. Yeah, I usually create only short videos, and I feel like in today's era, in today's day, for some reason, people have only like this short attention span, right? And it's really sad, but at the same time it makes it easier to create content. Like short videos are easier to create than longer ones. um, this short format works really good for me. Another thing is a strong hook. If you're into content creation, I promise you've heard this word for a lot of times, but it's a very important thing because, as they say, like the first 3 seconds of someone's attention is like the most important seconds, and you need to try and hook those people into watching the whole video. So strong hook is a must, of course. Try what I try to do with my hook, as I already said, like these 3 things, is to make it simple and really relatable to a person. So not just like how to reduce microplastics, right? But rather something like how to reduce microplastics in your food, for example, something like that. Sometimes making it relatable, or sometimes I also try to make it personal to me, because people love stories. People love personal stories of your either struggles or efforts, of your successes or anything. So sometimes I also like to make some content a bit personal, like how I got into research, or something that shocked me throughout the research, or something that I find really interesting in my research, in my day-to-day working life, or something like that. So yeah, I think creating content is really fun. So you need to practice, and you don't need to make it like too boring as well. You can make it personal, as I said, talking about important topics, but through your lenses, because everyone's experience mattered, and everyone's experience is really valuable and really interesting. Yeah, you just need to try and find the format that works the best for you. So, yeah.
Those are really great points, Dana. And it's something that, Just Zero tries to do as well with its social content. Our communications associate, Sakina, is incredible at creating reels and really looking at the data of what's trending and what's doing well, how to make maybe a trend work for us. And sometimes bringing our own staff's experiences into it, because as you said, people like those personal stories. I think that helps them to relate to you and the work and, what's really going on. So those are all fantastic points. Erica, in your role at Plastic Pollution Coalition, you've helped amplify lots of campaigns. So what are some of the digital strategies that you've seen make messages stand out when so many voices are competing for attention?
Yeah, great question. And part of the reason I did join Plastic Pollution Coalition as communications manager was because as a photojournalist, I'm very old school and I love just sticking to my guns. I'm not a social media person at all. So on my team, we have people in different compartments of the media sphere, which I think is great. And that is a great strategy when you are able to work with the team to have those assets, because it's kind of just like everyone is specialized in their role. And so while I know some stuff about social media right now because I have to, but our social media manager is specialized in that realm, whereas I'm focused on traditional press outlets that appear in print and online. We try to also work to amplify voices in podcasts, videos, sometimes on TV, which is great too, and also radio, I think, which is often an underutilized resource. And especially when you're trying to reach diverse audiences, often radio has a much larger reach than other mediums, and can also be that source that kind of cuts through the noise, in a sense that someone might be driving to work, or maybe they're tuning in the evening at home, and you're reaching people where they're at, whereas the scrolling and the algorithms that you have on your phone are kind of set, and you may or may not find the information that we're trying to share. Of course, like I said, I'm not the social media person, so I'm not trying to say like I know how to augment those algorithms, but I do know from a communication strategy, we really do try to reach everyone everywhere, wherever they're at in their journey of learning about this issue. So that means diversifying and really trying different media outlets and sources.
That's a really good point, Erica, and something that you noted there, the algorithms, right? the algorithms on every social platform are constantly changing and being updated. And, for content creators, social media, folks, it's trying to keep up with that too. And okay, what is the algorithm leaning towards now? How do we adjust to make sure that our content is still getting seen within the algorithm shift? So that's always a piece of this as well. But all right, let's move on. So we just talked about reaching people and educating them, but we know it can't be the end goal. We ultimately want action at the end of the day, because bringing people in to drive action, that's part of the solution. With that in mind, Erica, your work often connects individual stories to bigger systemic issues that are driving plastic pollution. So, how do you frame calls to action so that people see themselves as part of the solution and not just as bystanders?
That's a great question because it can often feel that way, especially when we say, oh, we need systemic change to solve this problem. And it's like, we do, but what does that even mean? And so I think that being very specific when we talk about solutions and pointing out that individual action does really matter in the sense that, yes, like we can't just be like, everyone have a single use stainless steel water bottle and a cloth shopping bag. And eliminate all the plastic from your life. Like that's not going to solve the core of the problem, right? But we can all, as individuals, embrace the solutions to the best extent that we can, and also recognize that as part of that shift and the embodiment of the values we want to see spread in the wider systems that are underpinning the inner workings of our world. So be specific about that and then say, okay, if we want to change those systems, please then, support this policy, which emphasizes this, or bring this type of policy up in your community, implement this, reuse system, support zero waste stores. Like there's so many ways that we can push for the systems change by either using the way that we shop or the way that we interact with politics, and also the way that we just start in our own communities. And I think that that is often the most immediate systemic change that we can have, is in our own community. Go talk to your neighbors, find a meeting place and set up, a place where you can discuss how are you going to implement plastic-free policies in your town on that level first, and then take it to the wider level wherever you're living. I think starting small, there's nothing wrong with starting small, and that change can start with you, again, embodying what you want to see and really practicing it. I think that that can be very, very helpful.
I love that you brought that up because it's so true. Most times change starts locally. It starts small and then continues to gain momentum and grow bigger and bigger and more people want to join that movement or have be a part of that action. So such a great response. Thank you, Erica.
Can I just add one more thing?
Oh yeah, please
Sorry.
go for it.
I put this on like a community level, but this also can be like your school or your church or place of worship, um, any kind of organized institution, even just your street, like talk to your neighbors. So just to put that out there, any type of change is helpful.
100%, definitely. Dana, what approaches have you found help empower folks rather than overwhelm them? And how do you help people feel capable of acting instead of just shutting down if they, are overwhelmed?
This is very important, especially in microplastics area, because right now there's so many bad news about microplastics and not a lot of good news about them, unfortunately. And I would say I struggle with that a lot myself, with finding a good balance between like sharing information but not making it too overwhelming. And I still struggle to balance these two, as a communicator. And sometimes I get comments from people like, this is very depressing. Like, what should I do with this information, for example? And I got this feedback. It's good to learn from people and what they're asking. So yeah, this is the lesson learned. So right now I'm trying to also not only focus on negatives, but also try and get some positive things there as well, like a glimpse of hopes in my content as well. And I think what I try to focus at this point is to try and make it, as Erika said, like making this simple things people can do, starting with small things, because that's ultimately the goal, to start with something at least, because that's how it goes. You start with something small and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I try to share the simple things people can do at like this point to try and reduce their microplastic exposure, their plastic use, so people feel more empowered, and feel like it's in their hands to change something. Because once we feel like this is something that we cannot change at all, we start to shut down, and we start to feel depressed, and we don't want to act at all. So I feel like this is very important to present the problem and also give this at least small solutions or small acts of changes you can do, starting with small, as Erika said, like maybe trying and reusing, or yeah, reusing your bags, or getting a reusable bottle instead of always buying single-use things. And it's not only about the impact of this action to the environment as a whole, but also to your mindset. Because once you start to implement these small changes, you realize, okay, this is doable. Maybe I can do something else. Maybe I can do something bigger. Maybe this is important. I want to tell it to my government, or to my like school system, to my workplace, where in my office or something like that. So yeah, it's also very important, and trying to be positive, which is really difficult in environmental space, unfortunately. But trying to be positive is also helping a lot. Uh, People are already overwhelmed with everything else in their lives, so at least trying to get some hope out there is also very crucial. But again, as I said, I struggle with that myself a lot. Uh, but yeah, small steps.
I think it's something we all struggle with as communicators in the environmental space, especially. It can be really difficult to, uh, share the positives, and especially, sometimes the positives, the solutions, the positives, they may seem small, but again, as you both kind of brought up, starting small is not a bad thing. Even though it might seem small, again, the more people taking small actions, the greater that movement becomes, and that is powerful. So I think, that's a great reminder that both of you really touched on. So thank you. Now, with that, and Dana, you kind of gave a bit of an example there, but I'm curious if you can both share a time when your storytelling directly supported advocacy or movement building in a way that inspired or surprised you. And whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to jump in.
Sure.
So at the time when I started writing my book, Thicker Than Water, um, I went out into the garbage patch just as a journalist. I didn't have the intention necessarily of writing a book at that time, but I saw that the issue of plastic pollution, all this microplastic in the ocean, not this floating island of garbage that everyone told me was going to be the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Like symbolically in that moment, I also recognized that the issue of plastic pollution was so much deeper and more insidious than I ever understood, and that I was brought to understand at that time. And most of us see the issue of plastic, or have seen the issue of plastic pollution, use the past tense there, as an ocean issue. And that's the narrative largely that we've been told, not only by um, the plastic makers who are calling this issue a litter problem or an ocean marine debris problem, but also from the media that has portrayed this issue kind of incorrectly for the past significant period where, plastics were first mass produced in the 50s. Scientists knew shortly after that that they were harming the environment and human bodies. And yet, because of the influence of plastic makers on the narrative, the real threats to those who were going to speak out in the past, um, we've really been delayed in understanding the full scope of this problem. So, in my work and in my book specifically, I tried to tie all of this together, give the full picture, from the ocean where most of us hear about plastic pollution, all the way to the places where plastic is produced and often disposed of on the front lines of this issue, including the fossil fuel refineries, and oil wells, and other extraction infrastructure that we see, and understand the impacts on people really viscerally. You'll see a piece of plastic, you don't think necessarily about the human impact of that, but somewhere someone was harmed by the making of this item, and someone will be harmed by its disposal. Not to mention us being harmed by using it, right? With all the microplastics and the chemicals we're exposed to. But I was really proud of writing that book because I did feel that I was able to, like I said, connect the dots. And that's a big part of the work I do, is really showing the big picture. I mean, there's so many details to the story, right? But to really show that big trajectory and help guide to solutions by understanding that whole full story.
Thanks, Erica. I really like that, you know, by showing the full story, you are leaning into, here's the whole story and solutions at the end of it as well. Like we said, it always comes back to solutions. Shout out to Erica and her book, go get it, go read it, and learn more from her and her perspective. Dana, did you have any, inspiring stories or anything that you wanted to share?
I was thinking about it, and I don't know if I have one because honestly, I started communicating science only a year ago, so I don't have a lot of experience still. I mean, yeah, I didn't do that for a long time. So, but what I'm really proud of is that my videos about microplastic reached millions of people, and I really hope it made a change, at least a little bit. But I do get tons of comments of people that told me that they did some changes after my videos. They had changed some of their habits, or yeah, they just, I don't know, ditched something plastic or anything like this. And this is very, very inspiring and motivating for me. And maybe it's something small, but I'm really proud of it. And yeah, that's a very great feeling to know that you're making a change in someone's life. And if they're grateful about it, that it makes it even even greater. It's an amazing feeling. But yeah, I don't have a story about like creating a movement or something. But yeah.
But you are creating a movement, and I think, that is 100%. Like you should be totally proud of, for only a year, into this, you have reached millions of people with your content, and that is definitely inspiring and definitely something that is making a difference in the world. So thank you, and everyone go check out Dana's Instagram, follow her and learn from her, science education through her Instagram. Um, Thank you both so much. So I do want to transition us to the audience Q&A section, and we have gotten quite a few questions in. So I will go through as many as we can in the next 10, 15 minutes or so before we close out. So, one of the first questions that we have is, how do you get specific communities to understand their impact because they don't care about sustainability and just keep growing, and how that damage the planet and wildlife by causing dense community building? So, do either of you want to take that one first?
I'll jump in, just offer my 2 cents here. So I think that it's hard to pinpoint, a community that doesn't care. I think that there are always people that care, first of all, but when communities are building up and land is being developed, like inevitably human population is growing, right? But we can grow as a species more sustainably, and cities can be some of the more sustainable places. Additional land doesn't necessarily have to be cleared, or existing buildings can be refitted to other purposes. I've visited cities where like old industrial buildings were, remedied and renovated, made safe to live in, and turned into, say, like low income artist housing, to serve people of, all backgrounds everywhere. And we can implement those zero waste and more regenerative systems, on a city scale. We can have community gardens, for example. We can have shops where, refill is available, widely available. And also I've seen really awesome, like swap events happen in densely populated areas where like you can minimize your impact by, instead of buying new things, swapping your things or sharing your things with other people. Everything from, car and like moped share to, renting, the clothes that you need for a fancy event. Like there's all these things that we can do on any type of scale. So I think it's not necessarily the number of people that exist, and often that comes into this debate. I've like people have come to me and say, oh, it's overpopulation. Like we're not overpopulated, but the way that we are living, or the way that we are, more likely to say, the way that we are have been sold to live, and by corporations pushing things on us to be hyper consumptive, and everyone have the house with the picket fence, and have that image in our minds. We can't just simply be content with existing the way that we have been brought up. But people are changing. There are people out there who recognize that we can live differently, and people are living differently. So it is about just rethinking the way that we exist on this planet, and not buying what we're sold necessarily, whenever we can help it. So I hope that helps address that question.
Thanks, Erica. Dana, did you have anything to add to that?
Maybe it's not that direct answer to the question, but first I just want to highlight that there's not one specific answer to this question, because especially the environmental problems, they really are so complex that you cannot just say, okay, we have plastic, we just change it to like biodegradable plastic, for example. And same for any other, like we have climate change, we just need to, stop producing something or stop using oil. So we need all the different solutions from all the other areas that will eventually help. Because all the problems, as I said, are very complex, and you need to have different approaches in order to really solve that. So yeah, it's not a direct answer to this question. And I also think that what's also important is the education in that part. So people usually don't care about sustainability or don't care about the environment just because they have a lack of knowledge in that area, to be honest, or at least that's my opinion. Because once you start studying that, and once you realize how relatable it is to you or to your loved ones or anything, then you start caring. So that's why I think also education is very important, just to get people to know about that, to start speaking about that, because we didn't know about climate change, right? Before, we didn't know about microplastics like 15 years ago, but right now everyone is speaking about that, and everyone is trying to do their bit in that part. So I feel like also we need to like expose people more and more to this knowledge, starting from a very young age, in my opinion. And it's really a pity that we don't have like environmentalism classes in schools, which I think is really important and would be very beneficial, especially since when you ask children, they usually always say, yes, I care about the environment, I care about the nature, and care about animals. So yeah, it's not a direct answer, of course, but something to think about, maybe.
I love that. And as you said, it's there's not one solution, right? It's all these different things kind of combined that will help to ultimately solve the problem. And, a lot of that is slow rolling, but if we're all working together, we can make progress. So, Another question from Maureen. If we need help with the actual learning of how to post to social media, is there a group out there that offers something like a class or Zoom? Or, is there any tips that either of you have for posting to social media and, gaining traction there?
I'm just talking from my own experience, but when it comes to social media, all your classes are the Instagram or the TikTok itself. Or at least in my case, it was like that. I was learning from other influencers. I was learning through how they do their videos. So you probably still scroll Instagram feed or TikTok just for the entertainment. But for me, I try to do that, not trying to focus on what they did in that video. Why did I stop scrolling and watch this specific video? So in my case, you can actually, like, especially if you're on a low budget or zero budget, you can actually learn from the Instagram for free. There's also a lot of analytics tools in Instagram itself. So when you do make a professional account, you have the opportunity to watch your analytics and to understand how your video or post performs. And that's really also, first, it's very interesting, or at least for me, but it's also very beneficial if you want to start creating content. So in my case, I didn't take any courses or anything like that. Maybe there are some, if Erika has something in mind, maybe she can share. But in my case, I did everything by myself, and that's totally possible. It's just you need to actually analyze the data. I know it sounds boring, but it is how it is.
That's a great tip, Dana, especially, if individuals or groups don't have a big budget, for a class or something like that. Just being on social themselves and stopping, like you said, to see, why did I stop at this one? What pulled me in? You can learn a lot that way, just by kind of critically looking at your social feed and what is on there and what other people are doing to grab attention. So that's a great tip. Erica, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, great suggestions. I see in the chat folks are talking about Beyond Plastics. They do offer a course on plastic pollution. It does cost money last time I checked, but it prompted my memory of I have been seeing over the years short 60-minute like kind of tutorials on social media that are sometimes offered by nonprofit organizations. So if you do follow some of the plastic pollution nonprofits, you might be able to find one that is free and available to you online. Also, like local community colleges might offer similar in-person programs. I've seen one or two of those pop up over the years too. So yeah, just search for groups that you support and that you like, and that you think are doing a good job. Like Dana was giving great information, like kind of emulate what you see that is successful and pulling you into. That's really great information that she shared.
Thanks, Erica. That's actually a really great point as well. Checking your community. I know for myself, my town has some adult community education sessions multiple times throughout the year. And, oftentimes they do cost some money, but, it's also, it could be a good way to learn the ropes of social media. All right, so moving on, we have another question from Ian. Moving away from plastics and other toxic products is often largely and unfairly characterized as a hobby for the privileged. Do you have any thoughts on how to make waste reduction feel more appealing and viable for those in lower income communities? Erica, do you want to start us off?
I think that it's important to remember, like, no matter who you are, where you are, you can do something to address this problem. And it can feel insurmountable, especially when you're in a low income community, or if you're on a low income, living on a low income. For example, going to a food bank and then suddenly you're confronted with a plethora of food wrapped in plastic because that's how it's presented to you, and not having the choice necessarily to get stuff that is unwrapped. But we can always make steps, and I think that's really important to maintain too, is that it can be incremental. And instilling these plastic-free systems on a community level or in your individual household can actually save you money in the long run. For example, if you are, buying clothing that lasts, if you can make that initial investment, or buying it secondhand, I think that's a really great idea always to look for something that's already been loved. But, second of all, thinking about also like on this community level, how can our community protect our health? Because the costs are not just financial of this problem, it's also our health. And you can look at, longevity maps and see that wealthier communities typically live longer than lower income communities. And a lot of that is because of environmental injustice. So these communities are fighting for their lives. I lived when I was a child next to a trash incinerator and ash landfill. Not that I was aware enough at that age to have done something about it. But this is a real life or death situation. And I think being able to recognize like we can't make these solutions elite. I myself don't live on a large budget. And some of my solutions are like reusing glass peanut butter jars for my leftovers because I don't want my family's food to be in plastic, right? Like there can be these free kind of scrappier solutions, and there are things that like maybe your grandparents did, or I know that my grandparents at least like would wash foil off and reuse it again, like to that level. But that's because, we come from a more simpler background, coming from a family of farmers, and yeah, we make do. And not all the solutions are super sexy, but you can eliminate a lot of plastic from your life, even on a low budget, is what I'm trying to say here. But I do agree that, the system change that we need really needs to start with protecting these most vulnerable communities first, and offering low-income communities easier ways to access things like food that are not wrapped in plastic, because that is a long-standing issue. And lower income people may not always have the time, especially if you have a family. I have a 13-month-old, and I know that my days go very fast. Well, between work and caring for him and all the other things in life, right? And so often just grabbing that, easy plastic choice often feels like, oh, it's the temptation is right there, right, for everybody. Um, but investing a little time and just finding out what works for you, preparing whole foods when you can, growing your own food, foraging for food too. If you can find the time, right? So it's not about vilifying folks who also maybe don't engage in every solution that you engage in. Everyone is on their journey. So giving that little bit of advice there.
Thanks, Erica. That was such a thoughtful answer. I really appreciate everything that you said there. And it's everyone's journey is personal, and we're all just doing our best. So it's really what, you can do, what you have the time and energy to do. And, it's also about trying to change the system so that they are inclusive and that everyone has all the same options. Dana, did you have anything to add before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to like I'm seconding everything Erica just said, and I deeply associate with this question because I was a student until July of this year, and currently I'm unemployed because I'm waiting for my work visa, which is a real pain here in Germany. But yeah, actually, when I learned about sustainability, I also was really attracted to that because it's kind of saves money you in the long run, and it's all about under consumption at first. So not just, you have something you're consuming and then you just replace it with a sustainable option, but consuming that at the same rate. But that's not a way we do that in sustainability, or how like the right way to do sustainability, which I think is the main focus should be on under consuming and try to consume as less as possible, which is I like, which makes sense that it's going to be more economically efficient, so less like cheaper. So yeah, reusing everything, try to find secondhand first, try and utilize your community. So maybe there are groups that are exchanging different things, like, yeah, if they have like this Facebook no buy groups, uh, maybe you've heard of that. Yeah, there are actually many ways to do zero waste or to do sustainability in an economical way, which I think, yeah, we should just do a little bit more research. Yeah, invest a bit of our time to do that. Yeah.
Such a great addition to that answer. Thank you, Dana. And thank you both. Sadly, this is all the time we have for today. I'll just share my screen real quick so that everyone can see the the ongoing schedule for our summit. So let me get that up here for you. Um, so as you can see, the summit schedule is there. Just a big thank you to Dana and Erica. I really, really appreciate you both giving your time to be here today. This was such an incredible conversation, and it was so nice to hear from both of you and your, experiences, your expertise. So thank you so much. Also, a big thank you to everyone who joined. I really hope that you enjoyed this session and got a lot out of it. As a reminder, we do still have more of the summit coming up. We have our next session this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. called From the Ground Up, Local Leaders Driving Zero Waste Change. This will have some presentations from organizations across the country that are working on zero waste advocacy in their community. Afterwards, you'll have an opportunity to join breakout rooms with those advocates to ask questions and connect with them. So we hope to see you there. We hope to see you tomorrow at our two events then. But with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and just say one more thank you to everyone for being here today. We really appreciate it. Bye.